everyone. I'm Stephanie Rudine, the Director of Donor Engagement for the ALS Association, Oregon and Southwest Washington chapter. Thank you all for joining us today for another ALS community chat. As I'm sure you all know, May is ALS Awareness Month, and in honor of that, we have some special guests. Today, our board president, Amy Frazey, will be chatting with Dylan Shanahan, who's below me, who's been living with ALS since 2018. I think you all will probably be very inspired by how Dylan has adapted to living with ALS and all that he still hopes to accomplish. I don't want to steal any of Dylan's thunder, though. We'll let him speak for himself. But I'm going to turn it over to Amy now so that she can introduce herself and start the conversation. Take it away, Amy.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm Amy Frazey, and I'm the current chair on the board of directors. My involvement with the organization started in 2013 when my friend Dee was diagnosed with ALS. I saw the positive impact that the chapter made in my friend's journey, and so I continued to get more involved, and in 2015 joined the board, and very grateful to continue to be part of the ALS community. So Dylan, thank you for making the time to join us today. And to start, was wondering if you'd please tell us a little bit about yourself and your life before ALS.
Thanks so much for the invitation to do this, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to talk with you, Amy, and all of you joining us through this live feed. I was always very active. I played college football, and then at second college I played basketball. I moved on from competitive sports and dived into a Japanese martial art, Aikido. I lived in Japan for about 5 years to train in Aikido at the source. I really enjoy traveling to experience new environments and cultures. I spent 6 months camping on an amazing surfing beach in Mexico. I was in my 6th year of 7 to complete 2 doctoral programs I was taking concurrently when I was diagnosed with ALS. I had to withdraw from school in my second to last quarter, but was approved for honorary doctorate degrees in naturopathic medicine and oriental science and medicine. Currently, I am writing for my website at lifehealth.net.
Wow. Impressive. And Dylan, I do want to share that you and I have a little bit of a connection. When I was reading in your background, I actually studied Aikido for a little bit back in my college days. Unfortunately, I didn't continue, but it was so inspiring to hear your story and how you've incorporated some of that training into your journey and with ALS and before. It was really interesting, and it was neat to feel that connection. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to your ALS diagnosis?
The spring of 2017, my first symptoms began. Initially, it was shoulder stiffness, then gradually my right hand weakened, until I couldn't use my dominant hand for anything by that summer. And thus began the marathon of adaptations to work with what I have. All along I was seeing all sorts of specialists. The neurologist ran a gauntlet of blood work and ordered an MRI. Coming in to discuss the results, my worst case scenario was having to negotiate with him recommending surgery. He said that the MRI didn't provide any smoking gun, and all the tests came back negative, therefore his leading suspicion was ALS. Surgery sounded fine after that. ALS is too rare for him to diagnose it, so he referred me to the ALS specializing neurologist. She agreed that it was most likely ALS, but it didn't meet the diagnostic criteria without multiple limb weakness. She suggested it could also be brachial neuritis. One source stated that ALS has a 90% 3-year fatality rate, whereas brachial neuritis has about 90% spontaneously recover. I was in limbo for months, both alive and dead, a real-life Schrodinger's cat. I was officially diagnosed with ALS in April of 2018 after my left hand became clearly weak.
Wow. Yeah, definitely a long journey until the final diagnosis there. What have you found some of the largest challenges to be in living with ALS?
I think the biggest challenge for me has been communication. I can't speak anymore. Thankfully, I was able to get an eye tracking tablet with communication software. It is a lifesaver, although it is much slower than people normally respond. This makes talking on the phone difficult, and group conversations nearly impossible. In groups, the conversation tends to bounce around from topic to topic. By the time I can type out a comment to add, I'm usually 3 topics behind the conversation. Texting is the most natural pace for me to communicate. Otherwise, with a patient person, one-on-one works also. Further complicating this is my eyes dry out, which makes it harder to type. I'm still looking a solution to this since I can't close my eyes well. Another challenge is having to train caregivers, especially with my communication difficulties. Finding and keeping good help has been a big issue. I've started saving instructions for various tasks so I don't have to type it out with new caregivers. Then is the seemingly endless surrender of my previous goals and dreams. I was planning on starting my own clinical practice. I was going to teach Aikido, and was planning on starting a family. So letting go of those dreams has been hard to say the least. In Eastern philosophy, though, letting go of one's attachments is a prerequisite to the evolution of consciousness or enlightenment.
Wow. Yeah. How do you maintain a positive spirit while living with ALS?
For me, it is important to frame things in a way that serves me. For example, I could think about the loss of my dreams, but that is rather fatalistic thinking, and frankly, will lead to depression. Instead, I choose to frame it as I said earlier, that letting go of attachments assists me towards my ultimate goal of awakening to the truth of reality. Surrender to what is, not my agenda of how I think things should be, serves my purpose and spiritual growth. Having faith that this is all part of my soul's journey is crucial for me.
Wow, that's something I think we can all embrace and powerful thing we can all take in our day-to-day approach to challenges. So why do you think it's important to raise ALS awareness?
I think it is important to know that patients with ALS are extreme examples of what is true for all of society, that we exist on the kindness of others. I would not be alive without the support of my community, without the taxpayers that have funded my ventilator and other expensive equipment and supplies that I need to survive. Nobody is 100% self-sufficient, and we need each other to survive. Patients with ALS are living reminders of this truth. I do things like this to be of service. I was planning on being a doctor in my clinic, basically a life of service. It was one of my most challenging adjustments to being disabled and depending on the service of others. Although, whether I am doing stuff like this, writing for my website, or trying to uplift my caregiver after she had trouble with another resident at the adult family home where I live, I can still be of service.
Wow, yeah. It's definitely all about the community and how you've shifted and adapted to continuing to, provide service, and the positive outlook is inspiring. You've touched on a lot, but if there was one additional message you wanted to share with others living with ALS, what would it be?
I would want to tell them that they don't have to be a victim of their circumstance. As long as we have freedom of thinking, we have freedom in our lives. We can choose how we think about things, and that can serve as our prison bars or set us free. None of us chose to get ALS, but still here we are. We do have control over how we think about our situation, how we frame things. Be mindful of your thoughts greater than. Not only is it the path of enlightenment, or in Western religion, contemplation, but it's also the difference between suffering and freedom.
Wow. Dylan, thank you for sharing all of that and your story with us today. I know you have a blog. I don't know if we can post that later, but a link, but some really inspiring and insightful stories that you have, and I personally find it inspiring, and I think many others would as well. So incredibly grateful for your story and your strength, and just really enjoyed chatting with you today, and everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it.